happens to be a classmate of mine from our college days. We both went to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. How many of you guys know MIT? Raise your hand. If you have siblings who've gone there, you guys are still pretty young. All right. So some of you know. How many of you know Boston, the city? All right, Boston, Massachusetts. So Charlie and I met in our college days at MIT, and he has gone on to have a phenomenal life working with some of the best companies in the world. He is currently at Meta. Some of you guys might know that they have rebranded themselves from Facebook to Meta, and he's actually working on some really cool technology things, which I'll ask him to talk about in a bit. But on the virtual reality, mixed reality labs side of things. And Charlie has also worked at Spotify. It's a music player that you guys might know about, a music platform. WeWork, some of you might have been in the WeWork spaces across the globe. And who knows Google? Maybe who doesn't know Google? Raise your hand if you don't know Google. I'd like to know who doesn't know Google. There you go. One of the most universal brand names. So Charlie has had a phenomenal life, both in college, getting into MIT, one of the finest institutions in the world, as well as afterwards at all of these companies. And, you know, he has found that public speaking and the ability to communicate well has made a really big impact in how other people perceive him. And that has led to all of these wonderful things. And no one better here than Charlie to actually give us an intro and a primer on the art of public speaking. How do you communicate to large audiences like the one we have in front of us today? So without further ado, I'd like to invite Charlie to unmute himself and maybe introduce himself by sharing a story, maybe a personal anecdote of how he realized in his life that the art of public speaking is an important skill for his own life.
Hey, Anshul, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. It's so exciting to see so many students that want to take part in sharing. Anshul was telling me about the goals of learning more about the STEM, industry, science, technology, engineering, and math. And it is really something that I can say is really benefited from Anshul and myself. Going to MIT was definitely one of the topics that was really stressed. And public speaking, it's one of those things that you realize very early on that it's going to happen quite often in your life, more often than you may think. For me in particular, when I realized it was going to be quite monumental, and it actually did impact my life quite a bit, was when I was in middle school and high school as well. I was fortunate. I was lucky enough when I was around 7th and 8th grade. I realized that my grades were pretty good. They were pretty good. And my teachers were all telling me, Charlie, you are going to have a real opportunity to be the valedictorian of your class. Does anyone know what the word valedictorian means? Just raise of hands.
Okay. I think you should write the definition in the chat thread if you know, because it's an advanced vocabulary word.
So the valedictorian means that out of your entire class, you have the highest score in all of your subjects: reading, writing, English, math, all of the subjects. And in the United States, where I currently am in right now, so, welcome from New York. I'm dialing in from New York, the US. In the United States, the valedictorian usually needs to give a speech to the entire class when they graduate. And this is called the valedictory address. So when I heard about this opportunity from my teachers, I became immensely scared, because I was thinking about many years in the future when I would have to give a presentation to all of my classmates. And it was just extremely scary. It was something I did not want to do. So I was actually thinking about, at that point when I was in 8th grade, to not do well in school, to start failing all of my exams so that I would not need to give this speech. And the funny thing is, in the very beginning, I thought I was being smart by saying, let me just go for the number 2 position. So not number 1, because I know number 1 needs to give a speech. Let me see if I can get number 2. The number 2 position is called the salutatorian. And I told this to some of my teachers, and they started laughing, because in the United States, both number 1 and number 2 need to give a speech when they graduate. And I realized that if I tried to make it even lower, if I wanted to go for the very last place, my parents would not be very happy with that. So from that point, I had learned that it might be worth my time to learn about public speaking and to get comfortable with the idea. I can say that I was quite lucky and I was quite fortunate because a lot of my teachers from that early age realized it was something I was very scared of. And I did have an opportunity to have this really great chance to be the valedictorian of the class. So my teachers did a lot to help me prepare and tell me about the skills and tell me about this. This is how you can make public speaking less scary. So that's a little story about myself and how I got introduced to the art of public speaking and how it started from, honestly, a very, very early age as well.
That's a really fun story, Charlie. I did not know that one about you. I think each of you guys here have had some experience giving a speech. Guys, raise your hand if you have given a speech before, in school, outside of school. Yeah. How many of you guys have had one of those moments where you feel nervous? The butterflies in your tummy, you want to just vanish for a moment, right? Raise your hand if you felt that before, that nervousness. You want to just disappear and not have to give the speech. Well, it turns out that with practice, you can overcome that feeling. And that's what Charlie will be talking about today. Before we dive in, Charlie, and ask you to take us through some of the wisdom that you have to share, since you've worked at all these fun, exciting places, and since you are right now at a company that a lot of young people always ask about, like, what is Facebook? What is Meta? What happens inside? Maybe you can tell us a bit about what you are doing to the extent that you're allowed to talk about it. What is your life like right now? What kind of problems are you solving? And what are you up to?
Yeah, definitely. It's completely fine. I think a lot of the things that I have been doing is quite common across all the companies that I've worked with, Spotify, WeWork, Google. And to help describe what I do, it might be a little bit more important to talk about different things that might happen when you start joining the workforce. So I remember when I was in school, my actual title is called a product manager, but when I was 7 or 8 or 13, that term did not really exist. It was not something that me and my friends would talk about. We might talk about Pokemon or Digimon or Dragon Ball Z, something like that. But what happens when you graduate from school is that you'll want to pick a certain type of profession or job of what you might want to do. And there are usual, you might have heard of certain terms like a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, but there's greater categories for how these positions start to group together. And two of the most general ones are makers and planners. So there are people who actually will build things, engineers, software engineers, construction workers. And then there are the people who like to talk about, these are the steps that we're going to need to take. This is what is important. This is how we're going to be able to get this done. Those are more of the planners. And with this group, there's also a third group that folks don't usually talk about as much, which is called, the general term is called the business. And the business thinks about, how are we going to make money? And who are our customers? What are the things that they're going to pay attention to? So my job is to help get all of these three groups talking together. And I know right now it sounds a little bit like wishy-washy, hand-wavy, but in terms of, if I had to describe this job to my kids or my younger cousins, it would be, my job is usually to talk to the business side, figure out what is important for the company that I work at, and then start to share this idea with the makers, the engineers, because the most important thing is we want to make sure the people who are building things are working on the most important projects. That way they feel motivated. They feel like they are making a real difference in the world. And we need to also make sure that the makers are talking to the planners, because as with all things in school, there's going to be a deadline. There might be a big test. There might be a big presentation. There might be a homework assignment that you need to do. So there's a schedule in when you need to get things done. So my job is to make sure that from the company, the business perspective, we understand what is important, what our customers might want from us, and make sure that this plan is shared with the planners, the folks who are going to get a schedule for us and make sure that everything is going to be done in a certain time. And most importantly, make sure that the makers, the engineers, the builders, they are working on the most important things that makes them feel very motivated, very fulfilled, and make them feel like what they're working on has great meaning. in their day to day. So that's a little bit about what I work on these days.
Great. Thanks for the context, Charlie. I think product manager is a term one learns much later in life, and you're absolutely right. I think as a younger student in school, it's hard to really empathize with it. I think that as they go through their own journeys, they'll realize the importance of that role. Now, I did want to ask you about how public speaking has really made a difference in your life, but I think we should do that at the end. We should dive in and let you talk about public speaking. And then I know the kids want to ask you stuff. I can already see hands raised. So as part of that process at the end, we'll also ask you how public speaking actually made a difference in getting into MIT, getting a job at these kinds of places. So guys, enough from me. A very special moment for me to be able to host one of my dear friends in front of all of you. So Charlie, please take it away. And thank you in advance for making time for this 9 a.m. in the morning, New York time.
Of course, it's completely my pleasure. Okay, so let me get my screen shared here. The art of public speaking. One thing I wanted to mention here is that when you all start to go through school and you start to go into the workforce, you're going to hear about hard skills and soft skills. This is going to be something that is going to come up more and more. In the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math, hard skills are going to be extremely focused and paid attention to. Hard skills are things that are more technical, have to deal with calculation, analytics. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the art of public speaking. Public speaking is more so known as a soft skill. So soft skills are things where it might be a little bit harder for you to take a test on, get a grade for, because it's a little bit harder to measure. That's usually why folks will call this a soft skill. So because it's a soft skill, I want to talk about public speaking as a technique, as a skill, but because it's more of a soft skill, there is an art. There's more of a way to think about it, and it's a little bit harder to quantify. And that's okay. If that's something that you're not as comfortable with, the more that you hear about it, the more you'll get used to the idea, and the more that you'll feel comfortable with it in the future. Just make sure this is progressive. Okay. One of the most important things about public speaking is to share an agenda. So I want to tell you about, this is what you can expect that I'm going to talk about today. The first thing I want to address, which is what I always wished when I was in school, someone told me, is why public speaking can be scary. It's really important to acknowledge and to talk about and make it safe and okay to discuss why it's scary. Because from there, you can start to realize this is the way I can overcome my fear. This is the way I can make it more comfortable. This is the way that I'm going to feel like I can do this anytime that I want. The way we're going to get through this is talking about the fear. And then next, we're going to talk about helpful techniques. We're going to talk about things that you can do to make it less scary. And I'll give you a little secret right now. A lot of the techniques we're going to talk about center around one goal, one focus, preparation. There is no better tool to help you overcome public speaking, the fear of public speaking, than preparation. And then afterwards, I will go through a conclusion. I'll wrap it all up, and we'll go over just everything in a general summary. And finally, we'll go through questions at the very end. Public speaking is the number one fear. Let me just say that one more time. Public speaking is the number one fear. If you bring this back to the story I was talking about when I was in school, it was the most known thing that students were going to be feared about. This is actually a tidbit that one of my teachers told me. Just let that sink in. Out of all the fears that exist in the world, there can be fear of heights, fear of spiders, fear of being in a small space, death. Public speaking is number one. The numbers two fear is death. So if you think about that, if you take this from a very mathematical approach, most people would rather die than public speak. That is crazy. That is something where it's just that common of a fear, and you do not want to let it shake you. So let me ask for folks in the class right now, raise your hand if you have a fear of public speaking. You would rather not be the person that had to speak. Okay, wow, this number is shooting up. Yes, okay, that is okay. It is okay. The first step is just acknowledging it, because it's something that is within you right now, but I can tell you it's going to go away over time. The most seasoned, the most confident, if you think the most expert speakers you have ever seen, they have had a fear of public speaking at one point in their life. And it's something that I want to let you know, you are not alone. It's something that a lot of folks share, and it's totally okay. It's completely fine and normal as part of growing up. So now that we've acknowledged this, what are some of the reasons that public speaking can be scary? There are a ton. Raise your hand if any of these resonate with you or you can relate to. You don't know what you're going to say. You're afraid you're going to be embarrassed. You're afraid that the audience is going to hate you. You're going to get booed off stage. You're afraid you're going to freeze. Similar to what I was saying before, number one. You're afraid that when you're about to speak, you're going to need to go to the bathroom immediately. All of these things can happen. I'm not saying they will not, but there are things that you can do beforehand to make sure that these will not occur to you. So let's start going back to how we can be prepared. Being prepared is the best way you can overcome your fears. The first piece of advice I can give you is to know your audience. So I'll tell you a little story about this. When I was discussing with Anshul about if I can come and give a presentation to the group, the first thing I asked Anshul was, can you tell me about who I'm going to speak to? Is it going to be students? Is it going to be parents? Is it going to be teachers? Are they going to be working professionals? Is it going to be a doctor group or a group of lawyers? This is really important because what I would say to a group of students and what I would say to a group of parents or a group of teachers is very different. What I want to know is, what does my audience want to know? So when Anshul was telling me, okay, this is going to be a group of students between the ages of X and Y, in my mind, I started thinking about what are some of the things that this group of people are going to want to know about. And from here, this helps me feel prepared. I will start to know, okay, this is the group I'm going to talk to. These are the topics I should discuss with them. Here are certain words I should probably not say or do say. So for example, valedictorian, when I was thinking about that, it was one word I wanted to introduce to the group to motivate everyone. This is something, if you have a chance to, strive to do this. Try to be the best version of yourself possible. Sometimes it's okay if you don't wind up as the number one, but don't let your potential hold you back. The point of the story when I told in the very beginning was, do not let fears hold you back. And this is all part of this general topic I'm talking about now, which is knowing your audience. When you're about to speak, think about who you're going to talk to and think about what they would like to hear from you to make their day better. And the next slide I'm going to share is the most important piece of advice I have ever gotten about public speaking. Knowing this fact is going to change the way you approach the topic. Most of the time, I'll say 99% of the time, there are exceptions, but most of the time when you go to public speak or you're going to present something, the audience wants you to succeed. Who you are about to talk to really hopes that you're going to do a good job. Let me ask a random question here. Raise your hand if today, when you were going to attend this class, you thought to yourself, wow, I really hope this person does a bad job. All right, there's one jokester in the class that decided to say yes. But in general, when you're about to speak to someone, that group wants you to do well because they have spent the time to sit in on your speech. They are putting in valuable time from their day to be together with you. So they are already aligned with you. They already want you to succeed. So whenever you're about to go speak, remember this fact, because it is really going to change the way that you think about this big, scary thing. When you have this fear of going out in front and talking to a group about any topic, most likely they're going to want you to do a really great job. So let that be the superpower, the secret force behind you that makes you feel really comfortable and really happy and excited to go and speak. This next tip is something that sounds so simple, but makes a really big difference. Because if you think about the audience members, they are going to always feel like they're on a journey and they do not want to be confused. So the point of this slide is tying right back to my agenda slide in the very beginning. In the first step or the beginning of your presentation, tell the audience members, tell the group you're talking to what you're about to tell them. Give them an overview, give them a small agenda so that they can feel prepared. Know that, okay, today Charlie is going to talk about why public speaking can be scary. And next he's going to talk about helpful techniques. Afterwards, he'll talk about conclusion. And at the very end, he'll leave room for questions. That way, as we go through, when I say we, because I mean the presenter and the group, go through each of the topics, everyone in their mind is going to know, okay, we're at step 2 now. Okay, we're at step 3 now. You never want to let the audience think about, where are we right now? Where are we in the presentation? I'm so lost. I'm so confused. I'm so bored. If you tell them the agenda, if you tell them what you're going to tell them, it gives them an idea of what to expect. After you set the agenda, you tell them, you go through each of the topics that you were about to discuss before, and you provide the details from there. And the last step is tell them what you told them. And this has to do with the conclusion, the summary. After all the points have been gone over, you want to wrap it all up, because most likely than not, folks have forgotten a few things here and there, which is okay, because that's the limit of usually our human minds and what we can pay attention to. So very simple example here of another way to prepare. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. So create the agenda, go through the points, and create a conclusion and wrap it all up. So if I could give another example here, if I was going to give a presentation about Pokemon, right? I would come in and I would say, okay, today I'm going to talk about Pokemon. I'll go over what the water type Pokemon are. I'll go over what the fire type Pokemon are. And then I'll go over what the electricity type Pokemon are. You go over all those points, and later on you say, okay, today I came to talk to you about Pokemon. I went over fire, water, and electricity types. That is what you can do to help create this safe barrier around your presentation so that you can remain focused. You can help the audience members feel like they're on the journey together with you, and you can remove the possibility of confusion while you're presenting as well. This part, talking about tone and inflection, is how you add your personal spark to a presentation. The worst thing you can do is give a presentation and everything sounds exactly the same. There is no change in the speed, the volume, the voice, the tone. You will start to fall asleep, I guarantee it. So as the presenter, what can you do to allow for a wave of energy so that it's not very boring, it's not very standstill, it doesn't feel like just calm, still water? You can adjust the pace of what you were saying. You can start to talk really fast, or you can slow it down. These are all things that you can do to keep the audience engaged, you keep them excited, keep them on their seats to see what you're going to talk about next. You can bring your voice really high, or you can bring it really low. Adjusting the energy levels is one other thing that you can do to get over and overcome this fear of public speaking. I will say this one technique is more on the advanced side, and it's okay if you don't do all of these techniques first. This is something that you can bring in as you get more and more comfortable with the skill. This is one that I love, filler words. Has anyone heard of a filler word before? This is a very specific term, but I just wanted to get, oh, okay, wow, this is actually really great. Okay, can anyone type in, let me describe what a filler word is, and then afterwards I would love to ask in the chat if folks can type in examples of filler words they have heard before. When you're public speaking, one of the fears I was talking about before is, what if I have nothing to say? What if I get caught like a deer in the headlights? Everyone knows I'm scared and I freeze. Filler words are what people add in to fill the time with words that don't make any sense or don't mean anything. The point is just to fill up the space. Can anyone type in the chat examples of some filler words that they may have heard of before? Let me see what comes through here. Yeah, like this. Yes, these are great. Okay. Yes. Perfect. And very repetitively. Okay. Perfect. Yes. You all got it right on the money. So filler words are something where, for people who are really used to public speaking, we refer to this as crutch. In the very beginning, it's something that you rely on, that you think is going to make you better. But honestly, you do not need it. The biggest secret about filler words is if you ever feel like you need to say a filler word, or you can tell that it's going to come up, don't say anything. It's okay to have empty space between what you are going to say. Fun fact, if you as a presenter don't say anything for 5 seconds, it won't be awkward for the audience. Actually, what it actually shows is that the audience will start to think you're thinking really seriously about something, and you're putting in a lot of thought into the presentation. So what I can say here is filler words is something I pay attention to quite often. Actually, every time I speak, I keep track in my mind of how many filler words I say myself, because it is something that becomes quite annoying over time to the audience. And a fun story I can talk about here is that when Anjo and I were at MIT, I took a class. It was called 15279. It was called management communication. I know it's the most boring words you can add together for a class, but we had an amazing teacher that would help us with our filler words. So what she would do is videotape us. So we would go up and present. She would put a camera in the back of the classroom, and she would make us watch the recording of ourselves afterward. Every time we said a filler word, she took a white piece of paper and she would flash it in front of the screen. So if you can imagine, I'm recording myself, and all of a sudden, every time I say like, so the white piece of paper keeps on coming back over and over and over. It was the most annoying thing to see myself doing. You don't need to do something as crazy in the very beginning, but filler words are one of the quickest things you can do to overcome your fear, and people will start to notice it right away. The last step I'm talking about here is tying in with the story that I was saying before. If you are really serious about getting better at public speaking, you don't have to do this all the time, but try it at least once. I would say try it at least once, because you're going to notice some very interesting things about yourself. To get over the fear of public speaking, practice. Practice does make perfect. What you want to look for when you're practicing are your pace. Are you spending enough time or not enough time over the course of time that you are allotted? Are you going to be speaking for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour? You can figure out, do I have enough time in terms of my presentation? Am I going too quickly? Am I going too slowly? Are there certain things that I do, mannerisms? Certain folks, when they speak, they sway side to side. Certain folks, when they speak, they might start to touch their elbows. They do things that can demonstrate nervousness. But when you record yourself, you pay attention and you see all of those things. It's really hard to avoid it. And the other thing, which I think is the most interesting when you record yourself, you're going to notice you sound different than how you hear yourself speak. So has anyone experienced this before? Have you ever seen yourself, maybe your parents are videotaping you, and you said, do I sound like that? That's so weird. So there's an interesting thing that occurs. When you speak, your mouth, the sound coming out from your mouth is a direct result of vibrations from the bones in your face, and that passes the sound into your ear, which goes to your brain. When you are speaking, you remove that bone vibration conductivity and you hear the voice directly from a microphone that's recording you. So your sound comes through in a very different pace or a very different speed of vibrations, and that actually causes the sound to be just a little bit different. And next, we'll go through the conclusion. So we were talking about, okay, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. So we'll wrap it up with a conclusion today. At first, we went over why public speaking can be scary. You might feel like you're going to freeze up. You might feel like it might be a little boring. Oh, go ahead.
So sorry to interrupt you, but we have somebody annotating, and if you see the settings in security, you could remove the annotation in view option. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I see. Great. All right. So we went over why public speaking can be scary. We talked over the fear, maybe you won't know what to say, maybe it might be boring. And then we talked about the helpful techniques that you can do. Know your audience, know the audience wants you to succeed, have an agenda, focus on inflection and tone, record yourself. There are a bunch of techniques that you can do to help you prepare and get over this fear of public speaking. And then at the very end here, we'll leave room for any questions.
Guys, why don't we start with a round of applause for our speaker, and let us show him how much we appreciate what he has just done.
Everybody, we can do a virtual applause as
Yes,
well.
yeah, you can do virtually
Like
as
that.
well.
Okay.
Charlie, I want to add on to what you said. I think that you've given us some really great words on these slides, but you've also shown us by example. I don't know if you guys were observing while he was speaking, he was actually sharing with you the example of each advice he was giving you. So when he talked about tonality, he was showing you what that looks like. When he talked about filler words, he was using them and showing you what would happen with them. And I just found it so great to not just hear and absorb the content that you shared, but also to just view your own speech today as a masterful example of what a good public talk can look like. So thank you for living by those ideals and principles as well, Charlie, and showing us by example.
Of course, you're welcome. I'm more than happy to share the skills.
Students, I think this is your chance to ask questions to our speaker.
Everyone, you guys can write in your questions in the chat box as well. I'm not sure if we can do all questions, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. But do send in your questions in the chat box. The chat is open, so feel free to ask in the chat box. We can start with Alishba. Alishba Arsalan, I'm just gonna ask you to quickly unmute. Yes. Hi, Alishba.
Hello, ma'am, and Sir Charles.
Hello.
How should I address you? Is Sir all right?
That's perfectly fine. Whatever you're comfortable with is okay.
Okay, thank you. So, sir, I would just say that how I can also remember that how when you said that public speaking is the number one fear. So, sir, I still don't exactly understand how is the number one fear, because I remember when I first moved, I'm in Dubai, currently in the City School International. And when I first moved in 6th grade, I had my first interclass debates. So it wasn't the most scariest experience for me, though, to publicly speak.
So that's great. That is great, because it means that this is something you naturally will feel a little bit more comfortable with. The thing is, across the entire population, there are folks who feel like this is the scariest thing they're ever going to have to deal with in their life. But what it means for you is that you already naturally feel like maybe you really like to debate. You will really want to prove someone wrong. So this means you have a natural leg up. So that's amazing. That's good for you. And it probably means that you're going to be quite amazing at public speaking in the future. And probably now, to be completely honest.
Yes. Thank you so much. And actually, I'm also saying, because after the first time I gave a little bit debate in 6th grade, I remember now I'm in year 8, and I've also won some debates. We have sometimes debate interclass competitions, and also against different schools, where the whole school is there. So I've won some of them.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, one thing I will say is I have a feeling when you go up against the other debaters, you're most likely going to win. But the important thing to know is that afterwards, thank them for the time, because maybe it was very scary for them. You'll never know, but I can tell from you that this is something that's going to be no problem for you going forward.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alishba.
Welcome and thank you so much, Sir Charles and ma'am, and all the other ones presenting this.
Great.
No
Awesome.
problem. Thank you for
Thanks.
your
Thanks,
question.
Alishba. We also have Rayan. Hi, Rayan. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. It's Rayan, right?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question. What if we forget what to say while we're doing the speech in front of all the audience?
That's a really good question. Okay, if you ever forget what you're going to talk about, try to remember another thing you are about to talk about and start going through that. Because most likely what's going to happen is when you prepare your presentation, there is a natural logic. Maybe there's an order that you already had in your mind. When you start going through, if you just miss that one small thing in the middle and you go to the next thing, there is a very good chance it's going to remind you about what you wanted to mention before. And it's completely fine when you're going through a presentation, you say, oh, there's one thing I wanted to also mention, and you bring it up. Or if you feel really sly, you can just sneak it in. No one's going to be able to tell you messed up or you forgot something. And the other thing I can say is the best way to make sure this doesn't happen is to practice, is to actually record yourself, because you're going to get used to this. I can tell you that yesterday, when I was preparing and making sure I'm going to be ready for today's class, I looked through the agenda slide myself and just made sure, okay, these are the points I want to make sure I mention. And the last tip I can give you is, if you're ever really worried that you're going to forget what you talk about, try to limit it to just 3 main topics, because usually the human mind is really good at remembering 3 things at a time. It's actually what I did for one of my friends' wedding speeches back in the day. I just made sure to keep it to 3 main topics, because that way it'll be very hard for me to forget exactly what those are. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
We'll just take a couple of last questions, and I think we have Arman here. Hi, Arman.
Yes, ma'am. My question is has anyone other than your teachers or friends inspired you or helped you with public speaking? Anyone who inspired or helped you?
Oh, yes, definitely. There are actually a lot of great speakers throughout history, and you can actually view them on YouTube. That's the most beautiful part. So this might get a little boring, but there are certain speakers that I really admire. Steve Jobs. Have you heard of Steve Jobs? He was the former founder of Apple. His presentations, amazing. The way that he is able to control the pace and flow of presentations is amazing and great. If you ever heard Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, that's also something that's on YouTube. Listening to the way that they talked and the way they presented their messages is a really, really good class and masterclass on things to pay attention to. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. also, the words that he said, it sounded like a poem. Those are expert level things. And the last person who I love to watch in terms of their public speaking abilities, Barack Obama. There are individuals who you can look up on YouTube, the way that they deliver a message. It can be very funny. It can be very serious. It can be very happy. It can be very sad. But they do it in a way that is very easy to take in and understand exactly what they're talking about. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Great.
Awesome. Next, we have Alia Ahmad. Hi, Alia. I've asked you to unmute. All good?
Hi. So I wanted to ask, what kind of situations do you usually tend to have to give a speech in?
Very good question. So what are the situations you'll have to give a speech in? You'll be surprised that it happens more often than you think. It could be something that happens through school. Maybe you're doing a research project and you have to tell your classmates, this is what I learned. There might be a debate. So that was an example that was actually brought up before as well from one of the classmates. Other things could be actually, when do you want to speak to your parents about whether you want them to buy a new video game for you, or whether you want them to invite a friend over to play with you? These are all opportunities where you can take a bit. Public speaking does not always mean you're going to be on a stage and you're going to talk to hundreds of people. It's actually a tool for you to project and instill confidence in yourself. When you're amongst a group of your friends, let's say it might be 3 or 4 of you, it doesn't have to be a big group, and you want to share your opinion. You want to say, I think Roblox is the best game of all time. I think this is the best Minecraft stage ever. You are public speaking, believe it or not. It's a very small example, but these things happen all throughout your day. If you pay attention, you'll start to notice these little aspects come up as well. But in general, the most formalized definitions occur in school. It's going to be some sort of assignment. You need to have a group project. When you go to work, this is going to happen very, very often, more often than you might think. But I think the most funny examples are when you're in your family life. They actually happen all the time. When you need to help convince someone to do something, you are going through a very small example of public speaking.
Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome. And we have our last question of the day. Hi, Praveer Sinha.
Yes, thank you. So is it fine if I just call you sir?
Yes, that's fine.
So, sir, I mean, I feel I am kind of okay at public speaking. I have given quite a few speeches earlier. But like, yes, I follow most of the tips that were given here, but I still, at some point between my speeches, like, although I have practiced a lot and like, you know, I'm giving the speech and in the middle, I forget everything. Like, it's just blank.
Mhm.
So has it ever happened to you, and how do you overcome it? Like, you have practiced, you have followed all the tips, and still.
Has this ever happened to me? This is a great question. Yes, absolutely. This happens to all of the best public speakers you've ever seen in your life. And what I can say is, don't let that demotivate you. Don't let that get you down. After every speech that you give, pat yourself on the back to say, congratulations, I did this. I was able to do something that didn't exist yesterday, but it happened today. And all of these experiences are going to build up over time. I know it's hard to imagine it right now, but there's an old Chinese proverb of the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Every single step that you do will build upon it, and you're going to get better and better and better. Because every time, I know you're going to want to get better and better over time. Every time that this happens to you, you're going to remember it. You're going to remember it, and you're going to think to yourself the next time you have to do it, so how do I make sure this doesn't happen to me again? And you are going to add in more and more shields, protectors to make sure that does not occur. The most brilliant performers that you've ever seen, whether it's a violin player, piano player, musician, singer, everyone is scared when they perform. No matter if they've done it 1,000,000 times, 1,000 times, just one time, everyone is scared. But as you do these things more and more, you'll get more used to it. And there are certain things that are going to get better and better and better. And don't forget, the number one tip I told you, or the golden secret, is the audience always wants you to succeed. Even if you do mess up that little bit, it's okay. The audience is going to forgive you, because most likely than not, they're not going to remember that you messed up. Only you will know that you messed up, because you know, like, this is my plan, like what I was going to do myself. But there are a lot of times when speakers are able to just fold in little things, and you didn't even realize what was going on. Similar to when you're listening to like a musical piece that's being performed and you're not familiar with it, you honestly can't tell sometimes if they messed up. But all you know in the end was that it sounded beautiful. Or in the case of a public speaking opportunity, a point was made and they felt like you did a really great job up there. So to answer your question very directly, if these things happen to you, you freeze, you don't know what's going to happen, something just catches you, just try to shake it off and move on to the next thing. Because most likely than not, it's not as bad as you think.
Charlie, I'm going to throw in one more suggestion there.
Thank you very much.
I think Pravir and others who are asking about what to do when you forget your lines or the entire speech, one trick that I have found useful is to just ask a question to the audience. And this is useful in multiple places. Like right in the beginning is when you're feeling peak nervousness, right? Before you start talking, you walk into an audience, or even if it's online, you're yet to start your speech. That's when the butterflies hit you the hardest. That's when that feeling of, oh my God, I have to go to the bathroom right now. I don't want to do this. And the feeling of, oh my God, I forgot what I was supposed to say, or I forgot how I was supposed to start my speech. That's where it really happens. I think if you just look around and instead of starting with what you were supposed to start with, just start by asking people how they're doing, or how are you guys? Where are you guys from? Just making conversation with your audience is a really great way to do two things. One is build some comfort for you. And the second is build some comfort for the audience. And it makes them like you even more, makes them want you to succeed even more. And in that time, while you're building comfort, you will remember, if not the first line, the second line, and then work backwards to the first line. It'll happen. It'll be fixed. The second time you can use this is in the middle. If this happens in the middle and you recognize you have lost where you were in the speech, you can ask someone a question. And in general, the audience does not know why you're asking the question. They think you're just a great speaker who, in addition to remembering his lines, can also engage the audience. And little do they know that, hey, this is a filler. So there are many ways to handle those situations. Above all, I think as you go through more and more practice sessions, you will pick up your own strategies to do this.
Great. I hope that answers your questions, Pravi. And everybody else, I know we all have so many questions. We all have so much to say, but we're running really short on time. So I think before we end the session, give me a big thumbs up. Everyone, we learned so much today here. So how many of you enjoyed the session today? Those of you who have your cameras on, give me double thumbs ups and cameras. And those of you who don't have cameras on, just give me virtual thumbs ups. So thumbs ups all around, right? We learned so much, and in the end, so many valuable tips shared, and I know we are all going to be making note of it. So everybody keep your chat on. I'm actually sharing a quick form with you all. If we all want to revise the concepts that we learned here today, we actually have a free class for all of you. If you click on the form, you can actually book a free practice class where you can practice public speaking with an online personal teacher. It's going to be a 60-minute session, and you guys can ask all the questions that you have to the teacher. All right. All you have to do is fill the form and fill up all the fields, and somebody from our team will definitely get in touch with you on your booked slot. All right. Sounds good, everybody? Quickly, you guys can fill the form, and if anybody is facing any trouble with the form, do let me know. Just raise your hand if there's any trouble with the form. And while we're all filling our forms, I would also like to thank Charles for such an insightful session, and Anshul as well. Thank you so much. I mean, so many tips shared, and I believe it goes for all ages, not just kids. I'm also taking something really valuable away from the session. So thank you so much. Any last final words, wisdom, pieces of advice for everybody?
Charlie, I think that's to you.
Yeah. You were mentioning there was, I know I forgot. So this actually is talking about what one of the questions for. I think there was like one question that we wanted to save for the very.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, yes, I do remember it. I wanted to ask you, how has public speaking made a difference in your life? We've all seen you have studied at the best universities in the world. You have worked at the best companies in the world. Any moments where you felt like that skill really helped you land those jobs, land those college interviews?
Yeah, okay, definitely. I was actually going to bring up my college interviews. So nice. There's actually a lot of steps where this all built on from each other. The first one, which I think is probably step 0 or step 1, was when I decided, okay, I'm going to actually try to be the valedictorian, and I'm not going to let my fear of public speaking hold me back. I think that was the first step. The next was when I was applying to colleges. Yes, one of the things you have to do is you have an opportunity. You can choose to do this or not do this. It's completely fine either way. You can speak to someone who went to the college you're thinking of going to. And that's a really great opportunity to have an opportunity to discuss and talk with someone who knows what the school is going to be like. When I was in college, there was also opportunities and times where my teammates, I was working in a group project, they realized that I was very comfortable with public speaking. So they would always ask me to present the topics, and that actually let me do a little less work in terms of the actual like written homework parts as well. And this also happens in the workplace as well. There's certain times where maybe I want to ask for a promotion. There might be times where my group or my team really wants to get people to buy in or share an idea or a dream that we have. These are all opportunities for, public speaking can really be a helpful skill.
I don't know if the crowd here knows, but if you do apply for universities in the US, there is an interview process for a lot of the Ivy Leagues and even a lot of the other ones like the engineering schools. And I think it makes a big difference in the first impression you create on your interviewers. And that's true even in later on in life when you're doing interviews for jobs. Big difference in the first impression you create when you are presenting yourself comfortably, confidently. And these public speaking techniques that Charlie has shared do make a big difference in creating those impressions.
Totally agree with you there. And thank you once again for such an insightful session. I believe everybody wants to say a quick thank you. So I'm just going to let everybody unmute and say thanks. So guys, let's all quickly get together and say thanks before we end the call. And those of you who have not filled the form yet, please, I've shared the JOT form again. You have an opportunity to learn everything we learned here today with a personal teacher, and it's specially just for you kids who have logged into our winter camp today. So don't miss that opportunity. All right. And
let's all say thank you, Charlie.
Yes, thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Everybody, you guys can unmute.
Thank you, Charlie. I really enjoyed the presentation.
Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Bye, sir.
You're welcome, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Love the energy. Bye, guys. Have a great rest of winter camp. See you guys tomorrow for the other sessions.